30 to 50% of your fractures produce 80% of your hydrocarbons.
That lends a lot of credibility. If you come in and can be upfront and honest and say, actually in this application, I think this product over here that I don't represent would be better for you. That all of a sudden now you become a trusted advisor rather than a salesman.
And I often say that we have all the requirements of space, right? Because it has to go underground and send us data from miles and miles away, and it has to work. Like, failure is not an option.
We'll put on, a standard mule shoe. Ours is slightly different just for that, but it's, everybody's got one.
The top drive and the drawworks really don't care whether the electrons coming at it are from a joystick or a PLC.
The panel, what you see here on the left, which is now controlled by one of my students, is showing you actually the control of our brakes.
As of now, geothermal is a pretty small market.
If you have tortuosity, the casing will be up against the side on part of the well. There won't be any cement there. The cement will have crescent around it.
So managed pressure drilling, it's been defined as a process to precisely control the pressure profile in the wellbore.
The key is being transparent with our clients in this case. So tell them what happened. If we had a failure, tell them exactly what happened. Whether it's our fault, whether it's whatever the issue was, we need to be transparent.
I think it's very important for everyone in the industry to know what's out there and kind of what's happening downhole as well.
I've probably worked on over 40 different performance limiters in my career. If I miss any of those, and the computer is raising weight on bit, and I miss any of those, I have a train wreck. The computer's going in the ocean.
Here's your new colors, here's your new thing. We don't do that
at all. Here's the tattoo you need to get.
Yeah, here's the tattoo. Sorry about the last one. We used to fake that all the time.
Hello everyone. Welcome to the Locksmith door. I can't say it.
V-Door Locksmith.
V-Door Locksmith.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the V-Door Locksmith show. That was my beautiful daughter Brooklyn. In which case, today is her birthday and Weston's birthday. So happy birthday to the twins. They are turning 8. Yes, I have successfully kept 2 small humans alive for 8 years. Yay me. So really happy about that one. This is the V-Door Locksmith show, where we are unlocking the secrets to success in the oil and gas industry. One interview, one technical presentation, and one technical screw-up at a time. We don't know what today's technical screw-up will be, but be sure to point it out when it does happen. Thank you guys all so much for being here. It is an absolutely amazing Friday. A lot has happened in our industry this week, and we have a lot of big upcoming events here in the near future. We did find out this past week that Robin McMillian was elected to be technical drilling director for the SPE. So congratulations to Robin. I don't know if he's watching today, but really excited for that. Wow, I look really washed out. Tracy, would you turn down that light there? Oh no, I look like a Casper the Ghost. There we go. That's a little bit better. Still not perfect, but we'll get this stuff kind of figured out. Still trying to get the new studio set up. It's not ideal, but we used to have the awesome fancy studio in here pre-COVID, and then COVID took over, and there was no point in having 75% of the office dedicated to something that wasn't going to be used. And so now we're just trying to make do as we go. So we'll get this figured out soon enough. Do appreciate everybody kind of sticking around. So guys, as always, let me know where you guys are watching from. Love to be able to give everybody a shout out here as we go through. John DeWart, as always, tuning in from the Colorado Rockies. Thanks for being here. Ian first, thank you for being here from the Woodlands. Yeah, those are both from me. William Abercrombie saying good morning from San Antonio. Thank you, sir. And Salim tuning in from Algeria. All right, guys. That was a quick little list. I figured we'd have more people. Do have to be able to give a quick shout out to Black Diamond Oilfield. They gave me a shirt yesterday. You guys stopped by. Chris Biggerstaff. So thanks for the shirt, guys. I do appreciate it. Trying to think. We've got things that are coming up here in the near future. SPE, ATCE, as well as we've finally or put out there for the ISC WSA meeting that'll be taking place the same week as SPEATCE on October 6th. So if you guys want to, be sure to check that out. It will be in Houston. ISCWSA Industry Steering Committee for Wellbore Survey Accuracy, which I am one of the directors at large for. So I definitely want as many people to be able to attend that as possible. All right, we've had a couple more people join in here. So Joy from Pensacola, Florida, thank you. Don't get many people tuning in from Florida. Isabel tuning in from Midland, thanks for being here. Cameron from Neighbors in Houston, thank you, sir. And Aaron Baxter, so back in Granbury. What are you doing back in Granbury? I thought you lived in Houston and then Austin for a little bit. Oh, guys, everywhere. All right, guys, thank you all so much. All right, oh, let's get my phone working over here. Sorry, getting distracted by things. All right, as per normal, you guys know this already. If you guys are interested and you want to be able to win one of these drill bits, look, this one turns from gold to purple, or purple to gold. And this one messed up right here at the very end of it, kind of like LSU did in their game, I don't know, the other week. I don't know. I don't watch LSU football. But I did make an LSU honor, a bit in honor of an LSU person who works across the hall, or across the wall, I should say. So if you want, put in hashtag Corva right now. Go ahead and put it into your screen to be able to win yourself a drill bit. And speaking of Corva, Corva has put together an awesome insight this week. They're doing amazing things with data, and not just that, they're also looking at many other parts of the industry. This is your Corva Insight of the Week. Be sure to type in hashtag Corva in the comment section now to win a drill bit.
So when you think about supply chain in oil and gas, the first thing that comes to mind probably is the equipment, the resources, the people, and all the way from exploration to refining that end product. It takes all these different points to follow that life cycle. Now, software is really no different in the oil and gas industry. Getting data from sensors, bringing that to a database to the cloud, running those algorithms, having cloud providers, and ultimately ending up at a screen in a piece of software that users interact with. That requires different players at different stages all along the way. And the cool thing is, we're really just at the beginning of it. Cloud hasn't been around for that long, and it will continue to bring new players and new technologies that enter in this supply chain that are going to make the analytics and the insights we get for our industry even that more powerful.
All right, everybody, that was your Corva Insight of the Week. So be sure, if you haven't already, type in hashtag Corva for your chance to be able to win a drill bit. All right, then we just got to add it up to the screen. Yep, there we go. And then hit the draw. Oh, we've already got 12 entries. Awesome. We'll give it, oh, never mind. We'll just go for it right now. Tracy's in a hurry to get this show over with. It's Friday. She wants to get out of here. All right, and our winner is David Teal. I think that's how we would say it. David, thank you so much for watching the show. I do appreciate it. Shoot me a DM, and we will get you one of these drill bits. Maybe not this exact one. You don't want one that messed up right here at the end, like LSU's football team. You want one that's nice and did the job right. We'll get that sent off to you guys shortly. So that was, like I said, that was your Corva Insight of the Week. All right, on to the main portion of the show. We've got two amazing guests here with me today. We've got Jim Mann and Dan Denton. Thank you guys so much for being here. I really do appreciate it. All right. So if y'all just saw with the intro there that Corva Insights put together, we were talking about supply chain. Both of you guys, that's y'all's background is supply chain, right? It's definitely something that, like, I think has affected all of us, pretty much everybody in the world over the last 12, 36 months. I mean, if not before, but now it's actually like people are probably actually feeling the impact in a probably a negative way as opposed to the positive way, like, oh, everything's running smoothly. If you guys can, give me your quick background on like kind of what you guys have done in supply chain, and then, like, I'm sure not only myself but everybody watching has probably got an absolute ton of questions that hopefully you guys can answer today.
Sure. So first of all, supply chain has a number of different parts. There's procurement, there's planning, there's logistics, right? Warehousing. I have done kind of all those dimensions in chemicals, refining, and now upstream oil and gas over the last 20 years, plus some management consulting and some special projects.
Wow. Dan?
Yeah, I go back a little further than him. My supply chain actually started in food, and I grew into high tech, and then oil and gas with Jim. Now we're separate, and I'm doing just about a little bit of everything from flags to downstream. And it's typically the warehouse or transportation pieces I touch.
Okay. So a lot of stuff, because, you know, obviously with the show, we do a lot of stuff with oil and gas. Oh, is the echo back on the wide angle one? Why? Why is it doing that? All right, hold on. I'm going to text my mom this right now. She's the expert on this. Sorry, guys. Giving us an echo. No better way to troubleshoot it than when we're live. There we go. Mom's a 30-year professional videographer. So if anybody's like, oh, you're calling your mom? Yes, that's the person to call. All right. So within oil and gas, like obviously there's a lot of ways that, you know, supply chain, procurement, you know, warehousing, all of these things. What are some of the big issues that you guys are hearing about, or projects that maybe you guys are working on with companies? Whatever y'all can talk about. I mean, obviously there's probably some secret sauce to it.
In the procurement space, I think there's been a lot of pressure on pricing. So we've been fighting. About 6 months ago, I was deep into that. I was fighting prices on a daily basis, receiving calls from vendors, having to manage their requests for increases. And what you see is diesel fuel on transportation-related items, on steel prices going up, and you get these proposals from vendors about what price increases need to be. And the key thing is understanding the unit cost that each contributes to it. So how much does steel or diesel fuel impact the price of the products I'm buying? And so only when you can quantify that can you reply to a vendor and counteroffer with what it should be, not because everybody wants 30-40% price increase, right? So we have to filter that out and get the true increase and try to limit the impact of inflation on us.
Well, and that's from like almost from, because you're working with you know, an operator, so that's like on the operator side, you guys are trying to be able to limit that. I mean, is there justification, I guess, for the service companies or the providers to be able to add a little bit more to it? I mean, there's justification in the inflation cost that, you know, the goods that they're buying, but can they really kind of push the envelope?
If we're going to negotiate, if I'm going to propose a new price to you today, do I want today's current prices in this market, or do I want 6 months from now so that I can cover myself and don't have to do it again? So yeah, they're going to go above the pricing they would like to, right? So we don't have to negotiate prices every quarter. And we just have to understand each other. And when that's a factor, we have to factor that in. Just transparency, and that helps streamline that.
Dan, your thoughts?
Yeah, you layer on that the movement of the product. You're buying space on a ship, you're buying space on an airplane, you're buying futures on that. And the futures have been going crazy. The cost of a position on an aircraft is just ridiculous. So you're negotiating the price of the products, but then you're going to start thinking about how am I going to get that product from Asia to Houston. And it can be daunting, especially when you're looking down the road where you're not even sure there's going to be aircraft available. So you're competing with other people to get a spot on that airplane, to get that product here that's already going to cost more than you were expecting. And then you hope it ships or it's manufactured. The labor challenges are global right now, and we're really feeling them here in the U.S. But you just don't know. Before COVID especially, you pretty much knew that part was going to be here within a few days. Now you don't even know if it's going to be manufactured. So that can be a real challenge when you're planning ahead for a build.
So in general, how far ahead should companies be looking at or trying to plan to be able to counteract so many of the different, I mean, because there's so many different things that are happening with supply chain. And I feel like it's like now all of a sudden everybody's like, okay, let's actually pay attention to this and what are all of the parts and how does all of this affect and how do we actually...
Well, that's where procurement is critical. They've got to know their client, because some clients are fine. Some manufacturing's fine. Some of the supply chain's fine, but you get in other areas and they're totally shut down. You are not going to get that component. So do I have another alternative for that component, or am I just going to be backlogged for 16, 18 weeks?
You know, the timing depends on what you're actually doing. If you're looking for MRO coming out of Houston.
What's MRO?
Maintenance, repair, and operations parts. So the very
Okay.
basics, PPE, industrial consumables, valves, pipe, standard pipe, that kind of stuff. It's all commodity, and it's readily available. And so you have short timelines on that. We plan out just a month in advance. If you're doing a project or a major construction project, you're thinking years in advance, right? So you have long lead. What's the longest lead time equipment, and that's the outlook you have to plan for. It could be years. And so the risk in pricing or availability out next year is completely different than the risk that MRO is going to be on the shelf in Houston tomorrow.
So what are some like just basic things that, like, you know, companies that have probably never had supply chain issues before, what are some basic like supply chain principles that they should probably either be aware of or start to implement? Like, is it having multiple vendors? Is it like you said, knowing your vendors and where their stuff is coming from and having those kind of conversations with them? Is like, you know, how are you doing? Like, what are some of those, like, you know, like if you're going to be in the supply chain business, this is like, okay, here are the first like 4 or 5 rules that you need to like learn.
One thing that is often a challenge is keeping the spend focused on our strategic suppliers. So if we have 1 or 2 strategic suppliers, procurement would prefer to route all of the spend through them, right? So that we can leverage the scale of our spend. On the other hand, in the field, operations prefers to have ready local access to these parts, right? So they're going to go to the local parts supply house, where we want them direct into a national supplier. And so there's always an ongoing balance between that. In this market, we would prefer to have those strategic suppliers and relationships with them so that we can ensure our supply. And so you have to do the work in advance to maintain that focus. You can't do that necessarily today. So preparing in advance with strategic suppliers, strategic relationships.
Dan, your thoughts?
Well, then you take it to, I'll go as simple as your backroom logistics, your storeroom. Do you have your processes documented, trained, and updated constantly? With this big churn in labor, we're finding people leaving their job for a nickel across the street, and nobody knows how that person did their job. Nothing's been documented, and they start over every couple of weeks because they have to bring new people in and kind of learn just on the fly. So when we work with our clients, we stress operational documentation. We stress putting that into training manuals and then updating every quarter, every 6 months. Go through them regularly. So it's not if, it's when you're going to have this labor turnover. You have documented processes in place where you don't miss a few days because you just didn't know how to do the process. That's been that's been across the board, not just oil and gas. The labor issues are just daunting because people are taking the knowledge with them.
So let's dive a little bit more deeply into that. So how big of, you know, how much does labor, you know, kind of affect supply chain?
Well, COVID kind of opened up the kimono per se. Before that, you went into the warehouse and the labor was a commodity, the cheapest you could possibly get. Equipment was old, processes were old. The thought was downstream. The thought was sales, design, manufacturing. Those are very well put together, but the warehouse always seemed to be the last piece. And when the stress was put on the supply chain because of COVID, couldn't get parts, couldn't get people, things started really showing the neglect some of the warehouses had. And one of the biggest things we've seen in our company at Waller is process improvement. No process improvement, no process documentation. So when there was stress put on the supply chain, it broke, and nobody really knew how to fix it. So we're seeing a lot of automation coming out of this, redundant supply chains, redundant transportation opportunities, things that should have been done years past. We're kind of catching up. But labor is probably number one. Just every single warehouse operation we go into to either do a design or to do a process improvement, labor is the first thing they ask for. We can't get people. We can't keep people. So that's leading towards automation, and in a process improvement team that keeps these documents fresh, because they're going to be very important for the next person that comes in.
So I know with a lot of kind of like technology related companies, they were saying that, like, who's the person pushing innovation the most. There was like the meme that came out, and it's like the chief information officer, chief technology officer, and then the checkbox was like next to like COVID-19, right? Is that kind of same sort of thing is what's actually driving the innovation on the supply chain? Because obviously you guys have been in it for a long time, trying to get people to, maybe think about, I can only imagine somebody who's like a, like the Zoom salesperson or Teams salesperson, prior to COVID, and they're like, hey, you could do this video conferencing, and how hard that was. And I'm thinking the same thing for you guys on the supply chain side is like, hey, let's do this automation, let's do these process controls. And the sales must have been difficult. And I'm guessing now that's gotten substantially easier, per se, maybe.
Somewhat. It's kind of the same challenges. It's getting the technology. It's not. Let's go with an auto store type system, which is an automated pick system in the warehouse. That's a year out before you can even put it on your property. So you've got to plan that year just to get it in your warehouse. If you want a new sophisticated forklift, man up, wire guided, narrow aisle, you're 8 months to a year out on that as well. So if you can't find it used, getting it new is going to be very difficult here in the States. And I'm sure it's a global issue, right, as well. But those 18 months that we were at home, working from home, manufacturing wasn't taking place, and we're feeling it now. It's the back end of that wave. A lot of the supply chain where we didn't have the supply toilet paper per se, it's now coming the backside. Everybody ordered so much, they don't know where to put it. There's not enough space. We can't get 40-foot containers to store them. So it's a backlash of the COVID. The same thing's happening in oil and gas. We're getting a glut on certain products, but there's few that haven't started manufacturing yet. Can't get it. So we have all this stuff, but I got one part that's holding me up.
And supply chain has been a disruptor out there for some time. For some, right? Amazon.
Yep.
Blue Apron, right? How do they do that? All the e-commerce leveraged that supply chain as a disruptor, but it didn't actually impact oil and gas or manufacturing in the U.S. until there was real pressure on them. Right? So that's what's changing.
So do you guys see that there could potentially be some new startup companies that help to revolutionize other industries? So obviously like e-commerce, Blue Apron, Amazon, right? Could there be other more hardware-based, physical-based companies that could, go, oh, okay, we're being forced to learn these lessons, and then those lessons that they're learning could help them leverage, a substantial amount of growth going forward.
Well, for example, what's the supply chain here in Texas? From Houston out to West Texas, it's hotshot trucks, right?
Yep.
How many hotshot trucks are there? It must be.
That's actually a really good question.
Hundreds of thousands of those things going on a week, I would say. That is not a sophisticated supply chain. That's zero planning, expedite everything,
get by
one thing on a truck, right? Mm-hmm. So there's an opportunity. There may be an opportunity there.
Well, there we go. All right, I wanted to let everybody know, be sure that if you guys are looking at the wrong camera, because that one's not working. If you guys have any questions, anything that you guys want to be able to ask in regards to supply chain and stuff, please be sure to throw the questions out there. Otherwise, this is going to be just a Vidor Locksmith issue. Me asking all the questions, because I've definitely got a lot of things to be able to ask. And I've got Jim's my neighbor, so I can do this anytime. So I really want to be able to give everybody else out there the opportunity to be able to ask questions. So if you guys want to, be sure to throw them out there. All right, so I do want to jump back in. So what can people or what can companies do about the labor issues that are there, just to be able to circle back to that? Is there any answer to it other than looking at automation?
Automation, looking at third-party logistics, having third-party companies come in and support you, because they have a third-party company is going to have a labor pool that you can share. When I'm busy, I can use some of this pool. When I'm not, they can go over to this other company. So automation, we talked about automation, OPEX, STOW type systems that do goods to person, You don't have people running through the warehouse looking for products. They bring the products brought to the person. Those are some of the things you can look at right now. But if you're not looking at it now, you're a year out. A lot of what we see in the supply chain over the last 18 months, they're starting to implement some of these things now because they started back then. Our small supply chain company just exploded with COVID. I was on an airplane every week. I was the only one on the airplane. And it's people saying, help, I don't know what to do. I got all my product coming back to me. What do I do with this stuff? So it's been a learning curve, and it's been fascinating the last 18 months. But now we're starting to see companies invest in warehouse management systems, transportation management systems. They're getting into facilities that are higher, so they can store up. It's a lot cheaper to store up than it is to go outside. They should be looking at all those things right now. But the first and foremost, documenting those processes. You got to protect yourself.
And so I know you had mentioned prior to the show that, within supply chain, there's a lot more to it, and that, there's kind of the basic elements, but then there's also like these special projects. What are some of those things that are taking place now that are like, like the next level of supply chain?
Dan and I actually met. He was a supplier, and I was with the company managing the relationship. And that eventually, we can talk more about that, but that eventually led to into a strategic project where we looked at what the design of the entire supply chain. It was an inbound MRO supply chain, so into like the refineries and chemical plants in the Houston area. And there, we looked in like 4 different areas. First of all, how did we manage the inventory? Because we have massive amounts of inventory of capital invested in inventory. Some for a major integrated oil company, it could be billions of dollars, right? It will be. Then it was the footprint. So what is our physical footprint of warehouses? It's a classic question. Can we consolidate to reduce cost, trade off service levels? Can we do it with the same service level? And then we looked at, we called it value-added services. We wanted to change the model from providing just basic storage at the lowest possible cost to doing a value-added service to the end user. So like kitting materials and delivering them to the maintenance teams just in time to do the work. And lastly, it was the organization changes to go around that. So we did that became a pretty comprehensive rethinking of the operating model of that inbound supply chain. That's what I would call a strategic project in supply chain.
What really brought about that thinking? Like what really drove, the team per se to be able to start to execute on something like that?
A couple different things. We did bottoms up. We found a lot of smaller opportunities and packaged them together. But also, I think we recognized that we needed to change the way we thought, that service piece. Like, let's stop. What was going on was there's a lot of pressure on supply chain historically to take out cost. And so he's our supplier and I'm with the company. We had to put pressure on him to take out costs, right? And that results in when you get lean, you start dropping services, right?
Yeah.
Doing less with fewer people, pushing them out to the maintenance teams to have to do the work, and that's the wrong way to take it. Sometimes you need to bring everything back together and offer a better service, so
invest in a better service.
Yeah. So, for example, the time of a warehouseman is much lower cost than the time of a mechanical technician, right? So what we want to do is take all of those supply chain services and bring them back into supply chain and enhance them and then offer it to the business as a service. And so that's a pretty significant change. And so we had to rethink a lot of different things. And the second dimension that drove it was we kept trying to consolidate the footprint because we knew something was there, but the costs never seemed cost effective until we did something different. And so we consolidated to a couple of focused hubs where we had manpower and breadth of services and left a few other locations that were low cost and dormant for long-term spares.
Oh,
so
okay.
Different changes in the model. So those two things all that came together into a special project.
How would somebody, be able to look at their current operation and be able to say, you know what, maybe we should bring somebody else in? Like, what would be some key,
clutter? You walk in a warehouse. If you walk into a warehouse and you don't like what you see, you need to make a phone call. It should be square, tight, neat. You should not have product on the floor. It should all be up in racks. You should have a system where you can go in to do key performance indicators, KPIs. Your team should be engaged with each other. Senior and more floor level people should have communication programs where they're talking to each other. One of the things Jim and I really learned when we brought our two organizations together, two big companies, we were kind of the center of the hourglass. And we worked together. We realized our teams on either side of the fence weren't talking to each other. And when we opened up the communication, we opened up scorecards and KPIs, things started improving immediately. If you don't know what's going on out there with KPIs and with any kind of indicators, you can't improve it. If you don't measure it, you can't fix it. First and foremost, when you walk out in a warehouse and there's chaos, you have a problem, and you just start right there. And a lot of people in oil and gas, just engineering and design and testing, fantastic. But when it comes to the warehouses, you'd be amazed how much they're neglected. All that time and money is put into the engineering of the product, but the storage of the product is poor. And I've seen a lot of change just in the last 18 months, how much focus is being put on this, because it's putting pressure into where they're making money. And that's making these products and getting them in the field properly. Can't find them, or they're broken, or and it's really interesting to see. And they're doing that with technology, warehouse management systems. A number of our clients didn't even know what that was. They had their ERP, but they had no idea what warehouse management. Why do I need that? Okay, where is this part? Well, I think it's over here. That's exactly it.
Yeah, I've been a part of those several times.
Or you go in the warehouse and you see dust everywhere. Your E&O, your expired and obsolescence. Are you managing that? If you don't have a system, if you don't have a process, if you're not communicating with sales and purchasing, you're going to be spending a lot of money storing dust.
That sounds expensive.
Instead of talking warehouses, we could also say laydown yards.
Yeah,
bone
same
yards,
thing.
right? You ever heard of those?
Yeah.
How many of those are out there? That's just like that's a warehouse that's neglected and needs work. Someone needs to focus on that.
Yeah, I think there's been plenty of
a lot of rust
places that I've been. They've just got stuff that's stacked out in the backyard. It's like it got used for one or two jobs, and now it's there to, either be a paperweight or just we don't know what to do with it.
At best, it's a lack of like some investment recovery or surplus program. Right? That's the best thing. The worst thing is it's lost value in equipment that should have been preserved, possibly.
And we push the 5 whys, big lean 5 whys. Why is it there? You ask that 5 times, you're going to finally get to the reason. I don't know.
I feel like my girlfriend needs to be listening to this, because she's like, "Why is that there?" I don't know. It's like, why is the closet organized? I don't know.
Unless you get the answer up front, the first 4 are excuses. The 5th one is I don't know. So and that's costly. You see a lot of rust in your field. Why? You see a lot of dust in your warehouse. Why? Where did that come from? What are we going to do about it? We're spending a lot of money holding this. Do we need to? And a lot of those questions have not been happening. They're happening now. They're forced to. They don't have the space. They don't have the product. They don't have the people. You've got to get your hands around the data.
From y'all's personal experience in asking these questions, like how uncomfortable have you seen some people when you start to ask those? Because then they're like, because obviously it's an issue where they're just like, oh shit.
That's another reason why you can need some external help. And I'm not consulting right now, so this is I think a balanced view. When I go into a operation, I don't know the least bit about it, right? And you often get a lot of resistance because the people there know the ins and outs of the operation, and they see the barriers to change every day, right? They see the things that are in their way every day, and they either are too many to fix or they can't fix them, right? I come in there and I don't see them, and I look past those things to a different place. What's a strategic change? So you need both. We wouldn't be successful without either. We have to know the ins and outs of the operation, and somebody has to go in there and think differently. And then together you can get kind of a transformational change.
I think there's something to be said about bringing somebody in with a virgin mindset that, like you said, doesn't know all of the obstacles, hasn't seen all the problems, so they can ask, well, why is that there? And then that's probably like when you do discover that's like somebody's like, well, that's there because of this, or this. And then you learn. And then there's people you ask is like, why is that there? And they're just like, I don't have a good reason for it. And then it's like, that's when you start to discover some of this. What are some of the like best success stories that you guys have either been a part of or seen when somebody actually took, the time to be able to look at their supply chain as a whole, whether it's as a strategic thing, if it's stuff sitting on the shelves?
Jim, I think you and I had strong success.
We had a ton of success. It was like we had problems calculating the economic benefits of it because the calculator required something like large investment in year one and then pay out over time. We covered it in the first year because what we did is we did all those things that I mentioned, inventory, and we managed to find so much surplus materials from projects and turnarounds, that sort of thing, that cleaning that up was worth something like $40 or $50 million of materials found in the field and repurposed and used internally. So
a lot of sight, out of mind.
Win.
Wow,
that was a huge win right there, and a financial like benefit to the project in the first year. It allowed us to do a lot of other things too, like to power through the challenge of changing an organization and developing like the services, kitting services, without yet having the technology to do it, because SAP things come slower over time. And the team that implemented it had to do a tremendous amount of work to like get through that. But it was that the advantage was the early wins on the surplus materials that paid for it all.
So is it a lot of like, cultural barriers that keep these kinds of projects from happening?
Business silos are, when you're in big organizations like we were, you have to break through those silos because they're not talking to each other at all. They've got their own demands. And when we finally were able to break some of those down and get the cross communication, the scorecard, so everybody could see what the other was doing, almost like a competition per se, the communication really opened up some minds on both sides of the organization. Again, it was actually a lot of fun. It really was.
I mean, you don't hear that very often. People saying supply chain stuff was fun. I mean, how
I'm a supply chain geek. That's why.
Yeah.
How were some of the what was the feedback from some of the end users in those situations?
A lot of pushback at first. That'll never work type thing, because they were used to doing what they were doing, but you're banging your head against the wall. You need to stop doing that and figure out why you're having an issue. And when you bring in ideas from other parts of the globe that are working, and vice versa, all of a sudden things start happening, and people they start enjoying their jobs. Productivity gets better. We win new contracts. It was a good thing. It really was.
And one push to supply chain in oil and gas is that everybody has a role in it, and it's like 10 or 5 or 15, 20% of their time. And so, going to pick up a part, right? I'd love to go pick up a part because it's a chance to take a break, right?
Yeah.
And so that is typical. And when you look at a couple chances I've had to consolidate that activity into a new supply chain organization, then you get some real resistance because it's part of everybody's job. And how do you take 5% or 10% of everybody and put it into one? That can be some like really impactful organization change for a lot of people.
So it's that one time it's like, oh, we need to run and get this. Oh yeah. I'll go get it.
So you need the people that are you need to have the people that are very interested in supply chain to do the supply chain, and that creates a lot of change.
But to his point, everybody's involved with it, from sales, finance. Everybody touches supply chain because it affects their world. That cross communication has to take place in an organization so everybody understands some of the challenges that are taking place on the floor. So if sales needs this, why can't I get it? Well, they'll know why, and they'll know how to get around it, or they know the avenue on how to fix it, instead of just complaining about it. So cross communication from the floor to the CEO, I think, is just critical.
Another thing is, there are siloed mindsets. So if you were in sales, you would very much appreciate building inventory of your products so you have them available to sell, right near your customers, right? All over the country. But that's not a great thing from a supply chain point of view, because it costs you a lot more to do that.
Yeah.
Maintenance has different preferences, right? They're going to want to drive out production costs. And supply chain as a function, that is their role. They are to sit between the manufacturing and the sales of products and balance the different objectives. So supply chain really, best people in supply chain have that balanced view for the company of how to factor in production costs, sales costs, investment in inventory, and balance it all and make those decisions. That's one of the core things supply chain should do.
And what's the best way for them to be able to go about making those decisions? What kind of questions should they be asking their team internally?
One thing I like to do is have a cost model, so you really understand it. Right? What are the economic trade-offs in making the choices? That's how I like to work.
Yeah, what's the cost of having 10 units sitting on the floor ready to be sold versus 2 to 3?
Or the production cycle is impacted by that as well, right? You may produce that product only once a month, so you have to weigh in how much do I order each time, or can I shorten the cycle and increase manufacturing costs? So those are the really complex balances we have to sometimes solve.
And the availability of the supply chain. Can I get the product? Can I get one at a time, or do I need to get 10 at a time because I can't get a spot on that plane?
So talk to me a little bit about that, because I've never even thought of getting a spot on the plane. Like, how does that even work right now? Like, I mean, is that like a futures market in and of itself?
Well,
to be able to I mean, I could see people just like
it's
gambling and saying, hey, I'm going to buy 40 cubic feet in September of next year on
That's what they do. Here and during COVID, here's what happened. The planes weren't moving. People don't realize a lot of that product is on a passenger plane. It's on Lufthansa coming over or China. Those weren't moving. So how do you move the product? Well, a lot of it went on ocean. Well, wait a minute. We don't have enough ships. We still have some ported because we didn't have enough business. So you got to get equipment into the field. The charter business for air freight went through the roof. I was hearing some ridiculous numbers to charter an airplane during COVID. 2 commas worth just for one airplane for a product. Around Christmas of 2020, the big electronics companies were just off the charts paying for air freight. It just wasn't available. It was a commodity. So they were going through the brokers, the big brokers in the country, and they were making a lot of money because they were getting their upcharge on all this freight inability. That's loosened up a lot now. It's not such a problem right now, but it's still there. There's still shades of the inability to get my product on a unit, a vessel, an airplane, even rail across from China to Europe onto a freighter. It's just not a lot of. There's more product than there is space.
And then this week, I think there was like the rail strike or whatever.
They averted that. So.
Oh, they did.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Well, all right. Well, let me jump.
It was close.
I want to jump over here. We've got a question here from John DeWart. It says, rumors abound that Amazon is looking into upstream oil and gas. They have been hiring energy professionals. Do you think Amazon will move into the oil field supply chain?
They've knocked on my door before. So
really?
Yeah. They had interest in the MRO space, actually. Mm-hmm. So you can imagine they could be there's a big potential for them in bringing MRO to the market. If I recall, it was a couple of years ago, so I'm sure they've advanced it since. They weren't in the refining and chemical space. They weren't as familiar with how we deploy it out into the field. But they didn't know that inside the plant there's a network of open bin locations, like a free issue of the most commoditized MRO, the lowest cost MRO, like the supply room here in this office. There's one of those in every area of the plant too. Office. But that's full of bolts and sub bolts and nuts and valves, PPE, that kind of stuff. It's all issued out that way. Which you remember Amazon used to have the little scanner. You could scan a barcode and it would auto order it. That's what we need. That's what we do there. Scan it when it's empty and it's automatically replenished. They kind of missed that at the time, but I'm sure they're catching up.
You think they started as a book company just a few years ago. Now they have their own fleet of airplanes. Amazon, from my perspective, when I touch other businesses, they're into everything, and they're successful because they're asking why. The 5 whys. They're asking why. Why don't we get into this? And I've heard the same thing. They're looking predominantly in the MRO field, where they can control some of these supply rooms, and they will manage it. It's just more. It just creates more revenue for them.
One thing I know that they look for is they ask what the customer wants. That's one of their leading things. So you have to ask what the customer wants. So what's the customer in the oil and gas space? Is it for MRO? It's the maintenance. It's maintenance teams, right?
Yeah.
And what do they want? Time on tool, right? They want to be out there focusing on their work, not on the logistics. So that's what they would need to offer.
And there's a big revenue spend there, huge.
Wow.
And if they see it, they smell it, they're after it, or they're at least looking at it. I've done quite a few projects where they were involved. They don't do anything part-time. They hit it hard. And so I agree with your question. They are certainly looking at it.
What other areas do you think within oil and gas might be, open for opportunity for somebody like Amazon or somebody to be able to come in and really put a fresh set of eyes on?
Oh boy, that's a tough question.
I'm not going to ask you guys all the easy ones.
I'll say I grew up in chemicals and then refining and then upstream. I think planning is a space that is done rigorously in the chemical space, but not necessarily in the upstream oil and gas space. So there's more, it's a more stable operation than it is in oil and gas, but still better planning of materials and material requirements could be a supply chain.
That's a very good answer, because you can bring in WMS solutions. You can bring in planning solutions, and they are big about their own developed IT systems and solutions. I can see them get into that as well.
I know one of the biggest issues, talking, to Kate or to Rick here in the office or anybody else really, has been parts made from steel. So like casing has been an absolute challenge for anybody.
Anything from steel.
Yeah. Is there any alleviation to that coming up? Like, is there anything that anybody can do?
We get a lot from China. And it's just, you have to look at the supply chain from that side. What's going to happen with that? Just not sure right now. China's opening up a little bit. So some of the things that are going on in China right now is they're still closed for COVID. I mean, the whole cities that are closed. Where we're opened up here, they're not. I look at it from the supply chain side, and I look at warehouse racking. I haven't been able to get steel for racking, but it's loosened up a little bit recently. And that's just getting your hands on the raw material.
How much does China actually affect our supply chain, and should companies be looking at like the very beginnings of their supply chain and how China affects like what they're doing?
Sourcing from Asia is one of the leading ways to drive down cost.
Yep.
So we're going to be doing that, getting those manufacturers onto spec and leveraging them is an important thing. But you're also lengthening the supply chain, and so you expose yourself more and more to these kinds of disruptions.
And the political risks right now are tough. I've seen companies looking Southern Asia, Vietnam, Cambodia, Philippines more, but even the manufacturing there is affected by China. China and India are major influencers of raw materials, transportation, because they own so much of it.
Oh, all right. Let me jump back over here. We got so comment here from John says change management is a key component for people to adjust to new. I agree. Then John says, I agree with the improvements discussed from very similar experiences. I'm wondering if you found that you need to improve drilling planning to get sufficient lead times to avoid hotshots and expediting.
That's anything in the supply chain. He's absolutely right, and it's to what Jim just said. The planning processes, if they're not if they're not well communicated, if they're not buttoned down, if you don't get some IT, some automation into it, you're kind of at the mercy. But planning is, we saw firsthand in our previous dealings, is sometimes can be the last thing that people look at. They just want to do, give me that hot shot. Hot shots are easy. They're expensive. And right now they're not as readily available as they were. So planning is critical.
Another way to think about it is rig downtime. That's easy to realize that's a focus area, right?
Yes.
But it's also relatively easy to focus on one objective. Right? We got to focus on all the objectives and balance that. Let's plan for the emergencies. So I don't know the answer, but there's an inventory management piece to it. There's executing better with transportation. There are others, sure.
And also the communication. Sometimes you have a hot shot situation. You have a hot situation just because you hasn't talked through the whole chain. If one side and the other side are on the same page, you would eliminate a lot of those hot shots because there'd be planning inherently going on.
Yeah, I can think of it specifically with one operator that I was working on a project with. They had 15 rigs that were running who were all drilling the same hole size, but they had specified equipment at each one. But it's like if there was a certain amount of equipment that wasn't used, it was getting sent back to the vendor shop. Whereas that's an approved vendor, that's an approved piece of equipment and asset. It's already been through like their test cycle or whatnot. It's already been inspected and said, yeah, this thing is good to go. Could have just been sent to the next rig, right? That was about to have tools picked up and to be used. But the problem is that there was no management system, I guess you could say, of knowing which rigs were doing what and which ones had equipment and which ones are ready, to where they could have just taken this one and said, let's just drive 20 miles down the road and drop it off at this rig instead of having it hauled all the way back to Houston and sit there and then wait for it to be called back out. And then when it gets called back out, it goes back through that whole inspection process again to be re-verified that it's ready to go back down hole. So it's
I had an even easier example. I was asked to go look at some transportation and logistics costs to move tubulars from the yard in Edmonton to the site. It's a couple-hour drive. Went up there, and what we realized was we were bringing entire strings out there that were not required, just to have it on site.
Just in case.
But it's only 2 hours away. And then when not used, we would have to truck it back, and that was expensive. Yeah, but inspecting it when we got it back and was the key thing. Why not just leave it there and don't touch it until we realize it's actually needed? So we had like more savings than we thought on logistics just by not inspecting it because we never brought it out there.
And by the way, while you're moving it, somebody else may need that product and it's not available. So they order it or order a hot shot, and then it comes back, and it's now you got double. It's if that communication, if that silo is in place and that communication is not taking place, or you don't have the visibility through the projects and the inventory system, you're going to get those issues, those challenges.
All right, awesome. All right, we got another one here. Nick says traceability of assets is key moving from one rig to another. Yeah, I think it's just emphasizing that one there. So where else are we seeing some of these issues, and what are some of the other things that these people can, like you said, seeing dust on their stuff in the warehouses? What are some of the other questions, the things that they need to be asking themselves on ways to be able to improve on, their supply chain within the organization?
When there's pressure on cost, I think you can go in and look for opportunities, but you should be wide open to find it where it is. Is a key thing, because you find it in inspections or you find it in an organization. It's somewhere there's opportunity somewhere. You just have to be open to find it.
Yeah.
Maybe don't go in with a specific objective. We don't go in to implement a system necessarily. We go in to find an opportunity, and if the system is the opportunity, that's what we do.
Understand there's things, there's things you just don't know. It's not your fault. It's not a supply chain manager's fault. They don't understand. There are parts of the supply chain, they bring in people, let them show them some different ways of doing things, and then get their team involved to start improving. Just take one piece of the supply chain, obsolescence, and start working on that. But do it with the entire team. Let the people on the floor understand what's going on, so they're a part of the solution. Be shocked at what those people will tell you. You know, they're walking around like this. I'm just going to do my job and go home. No, they want to be a part of the solution. And many times that you were walking around a piece of equipment that's been sitting on the floor for 6 months. Nobody said, "Why is that sitting here?" I've been walking around that, and every 3 or 4 steps, that's money. And you do that by 100 people that are going around with that every day. You're spending money to walk around a problem that could have been solved like that.
That's another piece of change management as well. You want to listen to them.
That's
Get them engaged.
Let them on the solution.
So let me ask you this: as far as innovation in the supply chain space, what new technology might be coming out in the future that could like really change the way that people operate and do things?
Already out is this. We were talking about the 3-dimensional like pallet storage systems. I saw in Singapore. It's so a pallet in a warehouse today. We go down an aisle, lift it up. In Singapore, we saw this thing. It was a 3-dimensional grid, and the robot takes it in, pallet in, and puts it in a 3-dimensional spot somewhere in the cube. I call it the Borg. I don't know.
Yeah, there's OPEX, Auto Store. Those are the more smaller parts, but then they also have the pallet pieces. And again, it's one person mans an entire module of spaces. You tell the system. You tell the system what you need. It brings it to the person.
Yeah.
Goods to person. It's getting big.
This isn't exactly new, but go to San Marcos and go on the Amazon site tour. It may be temporarily on hold because of COVID, but you can go in and tour the facility. And
Really?
You'll see the robots pick up the materials and bring it to the people who are standing in the same spot, picking out of what the robots bring them.
Yeah, you think one person, as they're picking a product, they've got another 30 robots coming to them with the next 30 picks, and they haven't walked one step.
It's fenced off, so you don't go in there because it's all these robots.
Wow.
That's happening now. Drones are happening. My previous employer is using them over the North Sea, and they're making deliveries with drones. So these things are happening.
North Sea drone deliveries?
Prescriptions going out to the, I remember as Isle of Man maybe, but they're taking prescriptions out to the island for people that live there with drones.
We're definitely doing inspections offshore or onshore.
I was thinking even just like the drones delivering goods and stuff out to the rigs. I mean,
yeah, they can do that. They've got the capabilities. They're small right now. It's growing, but it's the next step. The drone deliveries are a real thing.
Could we see localized hubs, maybe in like an area like the Permian, where you've got a large consolidation of drilling rigs, to where the drones are dropping off, whether it be PPE,
hotshots,
taking place of the hotshots and drill bits or whatever. I mean, drill bits are still pretty heavy, but it's probably the smallest piece of equipment that gets delivered.
I certainly see that as the future, because again, they're testing it now. And what's going on now, what's what you're going to see in a few years.
Wow. All right. So for all the drilling people that are watching, I want your thoughts on drill bit drone deliveries. Give us your thoughts on that. All right. They haven't gotten any more questions. So hopefully everybody join in on that one. I mean, to me, that sounds fascinating, is just to have, drones being able to drop off some of the, the equipment out there to the rigs.
You could have that bit right there delivered to the winner.
We definitely could have to send us their address or whatever, had it in the system or whatnot. If we had if we had everybody's address, name, and stuff in the Gibson report system, that would be very beneficial. Then we could deliver these a lot quicker. All right. I know we're getting closer to an hour here on the show. Anything else that you guys would like to be able to share? Anything you guys would like to be able to talk about? Go ahead and covered.
What do you want to talk about?
No, it's up to you guys. The show's not about me; it's about you guys today.
Well, so recently I started doing like strategic projects, which is it's not just supply chain necessarily. So had an opportunity to join a centralized team where they projects that come into the company or we have to develop them. We're on a team that runs the projects. So we run transformation projects on a daily basis. And so like it's kind of there's an art or it's a practice. I wouldn't say an art, a practice of how to execute a transformation, which has been interesting. You know, there's all kinds of different unusual requirements for that kind of job.
Any big lessons learned from that?
With change management, you better learn how to do it, and I am working on it. And I think the structured methodology is really important. So at times you might have just like an ad hoc approach to running a project, but it's better to have a very structured approach and to make sure you hit all the necessary points. In the project we've referred to on MRO, we powered through that without an organization to support change, right? Supporting us do it, and we had to backfill with that later. And it creates a lot of extra work. In a more mature program, you're going to have change management built in from the beginning, understanding your stakeholders, and you have the part of the team or the resources dedicated to communicating to all what we're doing and how it impacts them, right? So change management and structured project. Other key things are, you know, you got to find a good technical answer, right? So you need to be able to, you need the data, you need to model it, you need to prove it, right? That's always wise. And then good solid economics, a model that shows it. Like, what's the return on our investment here? So all those things need to come together in a project.
If somebody's interested in being able to learn more about change management, what's a good place to be able to start?
So most corporations have a change management team. You can work with them, but there's also, I think that all the different approaches and templates and examples, just Google it and you'll see them. Stakeholder analysis. What are the, how does that translate into a engagement plan? Those are all very like standard approaches that are out there that can be leveraged. There's free slides, etc. Or you can go do consulting for a few years and you'll really learn it.
Yes, you do. And there's on the supply chain side, there's CSCMP, let's say a Council of Supply Chain Management Professionals. That's an organization that
there's got to be alphabet soup for everybody out there.
CSCMP. In fact, their annual show is going to be next week in Nashville, and that's when everybody gets together and shares these things. And they've got a library of solutions that you can check with them on that.
Wow. I wonder how many oil and gas people will be attending that one. That would be a.
There will be. Yeah, there certainly will be.
All right. Terry says all the insights to current supply chain issues, both helpful and honestly kind of scary. Oh, we actually built a machine shop just to build what we can't get in a timely manner.
That sounds familiar.
So, I mean, that brings up a great question. How many companies are you seeing, say, okay, we're going to take this on ourselves and vertically integrate as opposed to, going with vendors for things?
I have one company I'm working with in Houston that's doing that right now. They've had a strong supply chain from China, which has been interrupted by COVID, and they have a big machine shop. So they've been creating their own pieces, and I think it's giving them an edge in the industry because they're getting product out that other people can't get right now. Another challenge that we have a chemical company, a dry chemical company in Houston, and the raw materials are very specific from just a specific part of the world, and they're limited in what they can get there. So what they're doing is they're finding production options in their facility for different things. They were making this one product and they were getting the raw materials from this one part of the world. It's limited, so what do? Let's make something else. And they're using the same equipment to make other products, and they've been very successful with it. Yeah, to get through all the supply chain challenge, you got to think outside the box because it's not going to get fixed overnight. It just won't.
All right.
The traditional challenge is traditional question is: do we own our fleet or do we outsource it? And the answer has been over time outsource it. We have third-party operators, and I don't know if does anybody bring that back in-house fleets?
A bit. The challenge is you can't get the equipment right now.
Yeah,
it's a chicken and an egg, right?
And then that opens to operate a trucking company is a completely different business than operating an oil and gas company, right? So you reintroduce all that complication to you.
Gosh. All right, then we had another one here from Sandy says, totally agree with all being said, but really only relevant to the domestic market. How do you improve on international scene? Remote, expensive wells. Is there an alternative to total redundancy to avoid shutdowns?
We've worked together on some pretty complex supply chains, out to Asia or Africa, North Slope, and that can be different. So, for example, when you have minimums like 6 weeks or maybe 6 months lead time to bring materials in, you tend to have more inventory. But it shouldn't be an excuse to have unlimited amounts of inventory. Right? In our case, we had $1 billion of inventory in one location. $1 billion. That's a lot of inventory, and we looked at the details within that. And when you look within it, some of those items are relatively fast movers. Why is that a third of that inventory? Right. So there are pieces of it where you can find opportunities. You just have to look through it. But you would expect more inventory to be in the system. What do you do?
And from my perspective, I came from a different perspective. Utilizing a strong forwarder that's got presence where you're drilling is imperative. And you have to have multiple forwarders because some are good in the North Sea and some are good in the Sakhalin Islands. You got to make sure you have got the boots on the ground that understands the political and geopolitical, the social aspect, challenges of that region, and you got to work with them. If going global, you have got to get the professionals on your side, people that are there on the ground. If you try to do it yourself, you're going to get bit.
There we go. All right. Here from John says, vertical integration can solve a near-term problem, yet also create long-term issues, silos.
We're seeing it right now. He's absolutely right. The back end of the wave of COVID. Now people have a glut of product. Where do I put it? There's no warehouses available. They're all full. I just came from Edmonton yesterday. The construction is amazing out there because there's nowhere to put all this product. There are warehouses being built everywhere, but it's the backside of the wave because a year ago we didn't have any product.
Wow.
One important thing is try to build like a fungible asset. If you invest heavily in next to your plant or next to your operations with a sophisticated logistics facility, what are you going to do when you don't need it anymore? If you have a warehouse in Houston, you can do anything with it anytime. Right. So maybe thinking outside where it's fungible, it has other uses rather than dedicated internal investments for something that is only short term.
All right, so one last question I got for you guys. What are your thoughts on allowing one of your competitors to be a part of your supply chain? This is something that happened recently in our industry. Is that an obvious no-no, or is it something that, you just have to weigh out the risk?
Did they let you decide?
I mean, let's say that there's multiple vendors, but one of them has a good product, but they also happen to be your competitor.
In my world, that's lead logistics 4PL, where you take on your client's supply chain and you use the best resources available. Kind of the future of the 3PL freight forwarding is this 4PL model. I'm not in that world anymore, but I'm seeing it growing, where you hire an agent, which could be a forwarder, which could be a 3PL, even a parcel company, and they manage your entire supply chain with their competition. And contracts are critical, though, right?
Yeah. Supply under contract, it would be an issue, right? However, when you're dedicated to one supply and you lose access to it, you wish you would have had flexibility, right? So you want to maintain as much flexibility on the spec of your supply as you can, so that you can enable alternatives, right? And having alternatives is the magic solution to pricing or someone else having control, right?
All right. Well, guys, thank you all so much for being here this week. It's been an absolutely amazing show. Like, I've learned a lot. I hope that everybody else has as well. You guys, all thank you guys for tuning into the Vidor Locksmith show. Next week we've got Hugh Winkler. He's going to come in and we're going to be talking about the early days of drilling info / Inveris, automated geosteering, as well as entrepreneurship. Probably one of my favorite topics to always talk about. Trying to thank you to Corva for this week. And I hope everybody has a good weekend. I don't really have anything else to say. That's about it. As always, know your industry.